Hello, my name is Annette Dalloo, and you are listening to The Heart of You. You are listening to episode 49, and we're doing something a little bit different this week. The tables are now turned on me. So today I have Ray in the studio, and he is a client of mine and friend, and we have been working together for almost 2 years now. And you may remember him from when he shared his story in the Akashic Record episode that was in season 1. Ray, thank you so much for being here.
Annette, I am thrilled to be here and love that I get to turn the tables here with you. And I'm sure, for the listeners too, it was one of the things that, we talked about a while ago about this, right? I was like,
yeah.
Wow. And, knowing you as both a friend and I'm not sure, counselor, coach, life
guide,
person, guide,
guide.
all those things, those categories that you very readily and effectively fall into. I was like, man, there's just so much to who you are and what you do. And you're always asking the questions. So I thought, it'd be so much fun to give the listeners a chance to learn more about you because you have a pretty amazing story and you're an amazing person.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for bringing that up because I hadn't even thought about it. And you were the first person to mention it. And I was like, oh, hey, that's an amazing idea. So I appreciate the beautiful idea. And thank you for all the kudos.
You're very welcome. And I'm very glad that you said yes.
Fantastic. So let's dive right in. What is your first question?
Yeah, the first one would be your interest in esoteric things. Did that evolve over a period of time in your life? Did you have one of those experiences where from the time you were a child, you always looked at the world a little differently? How about like the environment that you were raised in? And when did you start getting those inklings of like, I'm seeing the world a little different than most of the people around me?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because when you look back on things that you went through or things that you experienced as a child, as a young person, as a young adult, you might not clock certain things as being part of your journey or part of sort of connecting into the universe and that sort of thing. But one thing sticks out to me right now, which is when I was young, I used to, sit in front of the TV because that's, my mom was a working single mom. And so in order for her to get some extra sleep on a Saturday, she would plop us in front of the TV, give us our breakfast, and then go back to sleep. And when she would wake up, she would start talking to me. And I would literally not hear her. I mean, and she thought I was ignoring her, but I wasn't. I was literally so checked out. It was like I had this hyper focus, right? And so at the time, I didn't think about that as being anything that was, relevant to my life. I just thought, oh, well, okay, I can focus really well on things, right? So fast forward to what I'm doing now in the Akashic Records and that hyper focus to be able to really sort of disconnect from my conscious brain and be somewhere else is part of what makes the work I do relevant and effective, right? So small things like that. Throughout the course of my life, it was like little seeds here and there, little seeds being planted of spirituality, of, okay, this is how religion operates. Okay, maybe not so much in that direction, but some of the concepts I still held on to a little bit here and there. And then it was very gradual over the course of my young adult life and into my 20s. And there's an episode on this podcast that kind of talks a little bit about my spiritual awakening story. And I talk about how I started with tarot cards when I was in my 20s and things like that, and how that whole journey started. So if you want to listen to that full story, you can go back and listen to that episode. But that's kind of how it was unfolding for me, was very gradually.
Love that ability to focus. And any of us who are listening to the podcast have had the pleasure and opportunity of doing a Zoom call with you in a coaching environment or a counseling environment. I know when you're going into that mode, right? When you close your eyes and you kind of just settle in for a second. I'm like, okay, this is the time when I just need to shut up soon because she's getting into her focus space. She's getting ready to get some inspiration and guidance and the
Yeah.
accuracy of what you get with things. Because, and this is part of the beauty of getting to interview you is like you have multiple what we would consider esoteric or spiritual giftings or things like that, right? You have a great awareness of your guides and support system on whether you want to say it's the other side of this or in an extra dimensional capacity, but
Sure.
angels, guides, like, and so you've got that component. You also have an ability to communicate with the dead, which to me has always been pretty fascinating. And we've had conversations on things with deceased people, including the first time was when my dearly beloved German Shepherd who had died, you brought him up that he came to visit in a session we were doing on the Akashic Records. And you had no idea about that. And I about just burst out into tears because I was hoping that he would. And you're like, well, Ray, this is really weird. It hasn't happened before, but your dog is here, right? And I'm just like, oh my God, right? So, I mean, you've got
Yeah.
that ability too. And then just your intuition and insight into things. It's really a great palette of skills and abilities that you bring to the table. So did you consciously develop those or did they just kind of like evolve and manifest and you were like, hey, someone's, deceased aunt is wanting to tell them something, right? Like how did that all happen?
And thank you for that, by the way. It was a little bit of both. When I started learning how to access the Akashic Records, I did train with somebody who taught me how to do it. But when I actually started doing it, I kind of realized that I could always do it. So it's about really knowing how to access them. And then once you access them, you're like, oh, wait, yeah, oh, okay, I get this. So once that was sort of unlocked for me, everything else just kind of started flowing in. So I had never really channeled before. I had never spoken to anyone who had crossed over. I had never done any of that stuff before accessing the Akashic Records. So that one little piece sort of unlocked all of it for me. So that session that you and I had, and I think that was one of the first sessions. So that
The
was
very
a couple
first,
years.
yeah, that was
Yeah, so
the
that
first
was
one. Yeah.
yeah, so that was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So when that happened, like I was like, hey, that's never happened before. And if you talk to some of my other clients, they will say, yeah, there have been several times where I've had sessions where I'm like, huh, that's interesting. That's never happened before. And that kind of stuff happens a lot where I just all of a sudden something happens and I'm channeling or something comes through or somebody comes through and I'm like, okay, I'm just going with it. So if you would have asked me, 5-10 years ago, if I would be channeling and speaking to people who have crossed over, I probably would have told you were nuts because I was terrified of that stuff, like terrified of talking to ghosts or people who have crossed over, anything like that. Like that really freaked me out. So the fact that it's so completely natural when I'm in that state, when I'm in that receptive theta state, lots of different things sort of come through. So when I started doing the readings, I was starting by, I was being shown the sort of movies going on behind my eyes. I could see the past lives sort of playing like a movie. And then when I couldn't quite understand exactly what they were showing me, I would ask them, can you kind of put this to me in a different way? And there were times when my guides are like, you know what? Nope, just channel it, just speak and we'll give you the answers. And so I would open my mouth and then out would come this huge channel, right? So that's how that kind of came about. And then the first actual person that had crossed over that I ended up chatting with was during a clearing portion of an Akashic Record session. And when we're in the clearing portion, we're in that person's sacred space where their Akashic Records are held. And I saw this person come forward and we started having a conversation. And when I realized that person was, I believe it was this person's mother, if I'm not mistaken. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, okay, cool. So it felt, because it was in that sacred space, that safe environment for me energetically, it was a lot less scary to experience it that way. And so now it's much easier for me to do all of that work.
Okay. Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
Really kind of beautiful how it just kind of opened up and led you to deeper and different aspects of all these really great skills that you have.
Yeah.
When you think about your development in this, and you mentioned a lot of this has just evolved out of your involvement with the Akashic Records.
Hmm.
Because that's what I think, a lot of us that work with you know you for that aspect of what you do. And the way that I got introduced to you was through Akashic Records, and that was because of your sister,
Hmm.
Michelle, who's awesome and amazing. And we'll probably get to a question about you and Michelle later.
Yeah.
Someone had told you, hey, this is what you're going to be channeling, extra dimensional shit,
Right.
yeah, right. Right.
Exactly.
Was there a point where you were like, in my future, this is what I want to be doing? But you kind of already answered that. But the idea that the Akashic Records were the opening point for a lot of this, how did you get involved with the Akashic Records? How did you find out about them? Did you have a session and did it resonate with you, or what's that story?
I actually had psychics tell me previously, like way, way long ago, oh, yeah, you're psychic, right? You know that you're psychic. And I'm like, no, so like, I mean, I was in flat out like, sleepiness, right? I had no idea. And I mean, yeah, of course, I knew my intuition was good. Occasionally, I would have like prophetic dreams, but I would just kind of chalk that up to, oh, everybody has those or whatever. And then at one point, I had a Vedic astrology reading, and the guy told me that around the age of 50 I would become a spiritual teacher. And I laughed in his face. I was like, there is no possible way. I don't know what you're talking about, but that's hilarious. Because at that point, my sister, she had been on this path for a really long time. She had been on this path since she was like 18. She was studying under Deepak Chopra, like all of this stuff. And I was not even close to this realm. What ended up happening was I kept on getting signs of various different things. And so once I started realizing what the signs meant, which that was a whole other process in and of itself. But once I figured out what these signs meant and how my angels and guides were communicating with me, it became much easier to sort of follow their guidance. So I had those little seeds planted by the psychic and by the Vedic astrologer. And then moving forward, I'm catching these little signs here and there. And eventually, as I was going through sort of the meaty part of my spiritual awakening, so where I was going through all of my shadow work and everything else, I was voraciously consuming information. So I was reading tons of books and I was listening to speakers and I was watching YouTube, and my angels love to speak to me through YouTube channel. I don't know why, but they do. Like they'll show videos with messages for me on a regular basis. Like this always happens. And so I kept on getting these videos about the Akashic Records. And so I found this gentleman named Ernesto Ortiz, and I was watching his videos on the Akashic Records, and I was like, wow, that sounds really, really cool. So he had written a book on the Akashic Records. So I decided to get the book, read the whole book. And when I read it, it resonated, but there was some of it that kind of freaked me out. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. So I'm just going to put that aside for now. And then when I started working with the coaches that I had at the time to work through my shadow work and everything else, they were accessing the Akashic Records when they were doing soul retrieval. They were doing all sorts of other things with my initial session. And that was my first experience of being in the Akashic Records with guidance. So basically, I went with them to my own Akashic Records. I didn't see much. I was getting most of the information from them, but it was my first sort of experience of being in that energy. And then from there, it was simply a process of getting to the point of having enough of my shadow integrated until I was able to really be able to access them. So it's like my angels were preparing me for it. They were giving me all this information. And then I went to a seminar with Brian Weiss, and he took us through a group Akashic record meditation. And I saw a very quick glimpse of a past life of mine. And it was enough that I knew what I was seeing was real. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it was very, very brief. And then it wasn't another full year until I actually took the training and started reading the Akashics for myself. So it was quite a long journey, actually, to get to where I am now. But then once I got there, like I said, everything just opened up like fireworks.
Wow. Okay, that's awesome. And it's just such an unusual thing. I know just in conversation with people, if I ever ask, well, hey, do you know what the Akashic Records are? The answer is 9 times out of 10, no. I mean, and that's even people in yoga communities and stuff where you would think, probably a little more chance that they will be aware of this, and let alone friends at work or stuff. But it's really fascinating that you got onto that track and that it resonated with you, and then it just helped you evolve into all of these things. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
This may fall into one of those, like, don't ever ask a question you don't really want to know the answer to, right? You're probably gonna be like, you mean in our sessions, right? Or like, but how often are you working with a client where you're seeing something in the Akashic Records, or your guides are sharing something with you that may take you aback because it could be negative, or it could be something that is going to be incredibly disappointing to the client that you're working with, or something, and maybe the guides are even like, hey, Annette, like, we're going to share this with you, but this isn't for you to share with the client. Or what do you, first of all, do those occasions occur, and secondly, what do you do when they happen?
Yeah, they do occur. It's not super often, but it does happen. To answer your first question about whether or not I will share messages with clients that the guides, like my Akashic guide, is giving me, that's pretty rare. Occasionally they will give me information ahead of time to give context for what they're sharing with me, but then they'll put the caveat of like, hey, don't share this with them yet. They're not ready to hear this information yet, but we're giving this to you as context. That happens occasionally, but it's not super common. Okay. The other one where you're asking if it's challenging information and how do you deal with it, that happens a bit more frequently. And the answer is you just push through it. The first couple of times I had challenging information in sessions, I really hesitated to give the client the information. And I kept on hearing, just do it. Just tell them, it'll be fine. And when I did, the person had an immense breakthrough in what they had been feeling in this lifetime. So, for example, if somebody has been, let's say, a murderer in a previous life, or, because we all have been at some point, if any of us have been, really horrible people in past lives, and, sometimes those kind of things come up, you have to really bring those to light, because that's what brings the healing, is for people to not only know, but then forgive themselves and offer up that non-judgment for what had happened in that previous lifetime. So when you bring that stuff up, they'll let me know if the client is going to have a hard time with it. So I will hear immediately upon opening the Akashic Records, this is going to be tough for them. They will literally say that to me. And so that way I have the heads up ahead of time to know that this is going to be a tough session for the client. And then I will be able to then put things in a way that is effective for them to know, but I can approach the session with a lot more compassion and sort of ask the client, how are they doing, more often throughout the session, and make sure that they're in a good place, right? So it does make a difference as to how I approach the session. And I can also feel the energy of the person I'm reading, because if they're super open, I can feel that open energy in the session. And I know that they're going to be receptive to whatever it is coming through. If I feel their energy is very closed, I already know that they're going to probably have a little bit of resistance to what I'm going to say. So what I'll say is something like, well, okay, if you are not feeling fully on board with all of the information, just take what resonates, and whatever doesn't, you can leave it. And maybe if you revisit it in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe it might resonate. Because if you consider the fact that when I was just talking about the Vedic astrologer, he told me all that information back when I had that reading, and I was like completely resistant to it. I was like, yeah, there's no way I'm going to be a spiritual leader. There's no way I'm going to be doing this. There's no way I'm going to be doing that. So I was not ready for that information. But then here we are, a decade later, and yep, okay,
Yeah, Right.
So sometimes the information that you get is not relevant right now. Maybe it's relevant for 5 years from now or 10 years from now.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to like to gauge how the person is going to receive the information, as well as being careful about the delivery of information to make sure that it is in a way that they're going to be most able to receive it.
Got it. Okay. Fascinating stuff. And yeah, Vedic astrology, for maybe anyone who's listening who isn't familiar with it compared to what would normally be called Western astrology that most of us are more familiar with, Vedic astrology goes back a long way, way farther than Western
Yeah.
astrology. There are different nuances to it, right? They don't
Mm-hmm.
recognize the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto in it, but they do have Rahu and Nehu and the nodes of the sun and there's other, of the moon and other things have a much greater significance in Vedic astrology. So it's really more of like what we would consider like a Hindu-based astrological model, but Vedic astrology is scary. I had a session with a gentleman who has been doing it for decades, a native Indian man, and it seemed not only incredibly accurate, but I was like, I'm not liking the direction of this, right? Which, regarding the Akashic Records, I've got two questions on this. If you think about tarot reading, astrology, even the Akashics, to what degree do you think it is at the mercy of the interpreter as far as the accuracy and confidence of the information, right? So if we had three people who were reading tarot and they were in three different rooms and one person went to three different sessions, you would think that if there was a universal single source of truth, that it should be a pretty similar reading if you were on the same topic. Obviously, if you went into one and said,
Sure.
"You tell me about my relationships," and the other one was like, "Tell me about my career opportunities," and tell me about my family life, or like, those would all be very different. But if you went in and just said, "What's spirit trying to share with me now?" I don't know, maybe you still would get three different messages. But like if someone went to you for an Akashic reading and they went to another Akashic reader, it seems like the Hall of Records or the Akashic Records and the Book of Life, some other terms that people may be more familiar with, it would be more defined. There wouldn't be as much interpretation space as there would be like with tarot or something. So have you ever run into that where like you've gotten what you're confident is clear information for someone and that person's like, well, that's not what I heard before, or what? And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that has happened a few times. Yeah. The first thing is that I have to acknowledge that we are human, right? So we are getting these messages through our human brains, through our human bodies, and it's not going to be perfect. It never is. So we are sort of filtering this information through our emotions, through everything that we are going through on a personal level. To say that you would have, let's say, 3 different readers, each in a different room, and then the person goes to every single reader and hoping to get the exact same answer from all 3, I would say that it's probably next to impossible to have that, because my guides will use my own experiences as cues. So if there is something that somebody is going through, they'll show me a flash of, let's say, something I've been through in my life. And I will associate that with maybe what they might be going through, right? So there's some of that that's going on. There is also a little bit of interpretation. There is an element of how deeply you are able to connect at any given moment. So, for example, if I'm personally going through something pretty rough, like energetically, most of the time I will cancel sessions or I will move sessions because I know that I'm not able to connect properly. And the amount of energy, first of all, that I have to give for these sessions is a lot. So I don't want to sort of deplete my energy, but then also, the readings that I give might not be as good as they would be if I was in, full top form, right? So many people who do readings are all going to be coming from sort of different energies, different backgrounds, like different talents, different gifts, all kinds of things. So the themes might be similar. If you get the same reading from those 3 people, the themes might be similar, but there is also the possibility that maybe one reader's picking up on one particular energy and then another readers picking up on a totally different energy that is going on with you, that is in your subconscious that you don't even realize, right? So there are so many nuances to this that can really bring up that sense of doubt of, okay, well, is this really true? Is this real? And the only answer that I have is take what resonates. If it resonates with you, if it really hits you in the heart space, and if it's really getting to that place where you feel like you're making that transformation, beautiful, take it. If it's not resonating with you, then just leave it, right? I actually did have a reading recently where throughout the entire reading, the person I was reading for was saying, yes, that totally resonates. Yes, 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 yes. Yes, throughout the entire thing. And then we get towards the end and they asked me about a relative of theirs. And I started seeing the relationship between them, and I started to explain the relationship between them. Now, keep in mind, when I'm talking about relationships, I'm seeing the higher selves of each person. So I'm looking at the energetic version, not necessarily the three-dimensional human version of each person. So I'm telling her this and I'm saying, like, okay, so this is what I'm seeing. And when I got done, she's like, you know what? That doesn't resonate at all. Like that completely doesn't resonate. And I said, you know what? That's totally fine. This might be energy that is coming up. It could be something that could be happening in the future, potentially. It could be something from a past life. And we can take a look at that if you want. But ultimately, I've gotten to the point now in the amount of sessions that I've done to have the confidence that whatever I am getting is relevant in some way. Even if my interpretation is slightly off, the message is still relevant, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
I know that there's times in our sessions where I'm like, really, Annette? Because that sure isn't happening in here in 3D land, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But just with the understanding that truly energy is a different situation. We're multi-dimensional beings.
Mm-hmm.
We just happen to, be most aware at this point of this plane of existence and this frequency that we're on.
Right.
There is more going on than meets the eye. So yeah, I think that's a super important point that you just shared right there. Really interesting. And I'm just wondering, like, how did that person take it? Were they like, well, I'm still open to looking at this? Or were they just like, nope, didn't hear what I wanted to hear and that doesn't resonate. Boom, bye.
No, they were totally fine about it. They were like, yeah, that's fine. It makes sense. Like it doesn't resonate, but that's, I think because the whole rest of the session prior to that was spot on for her, I think she just kind of chalked it up to whatever. Like, okay, that's fine. No big deal. It wasn't a huge thing that we were tackling as far as like energy and topic. It was sort of more of a, is this relationship done kind of thing. It wasn't a huge factor in the whole scheme of the reading. I did have one other client that, and this was interesting because I had never done this before, and this was a gift from another client of mine. So this client that I had, she came back to me many times and wanted to gift a session to a relative of hers. And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. And so she gave the gift to her relative. Her relative got on the call, and I realized instantly that this person is not open spiritually at all. And the second I got on the call, I was like, oh no, I should have checked in before I did this call. Like I should have checked in and I didn't. So I knew that basically I'd be telling her all of this information and she would not receive any of it, that she was just going to be completely shut off for the whole reading. So that one was tough because I did it. I did the reading. I gave her exactly the information she needed to hear, but like she was kind of having none of it. So I just had to accept that was going to be the case. And then hopefully maybe, in a few years, maybe she'll go back and listen to the reading and say, oh, actually there was something to that, but that's not up to me. That's, that's part of her journey.
Yeah. Wow. I was going to ask then, what impact on either your ability to read or just the flow of the energy in a session is dependent upon the openness and the awareness / spiritual awakeness of the person that you're working with?
Yeah, it's night and day, quite frankly. When you're working with somebody who is spiritually open, it's like you're both in the records together. It's like an exchange of information and it just flows. When it is somebody who is not as spiritually awakened, I don't want to say it's harder. It's the energy has like a different quality to it. It's not as easy and it doesn't flow as beautifully. It's a little bit more, how do I put it? Like the only word I could use is like staccato. Like, in music they use for it to be like, sort of chopped up into little bits. Like that's kind of how the energy feels.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hey, a little more on your background. So you're living in Paris. You
I am.
love Paris.
I do. Yep.
You're American or by birth. So you
Mhm.
want to tell us a little bit about, are you originally from Chicago now, or was there
Mm-mm.
something?
No. I'm originally from a suburb of Detroit called Troy/Clawson. My mom lived in Clawson. My dad lived in Troy, Michigan. And that's about a half an hour away from Detroit. And I grew up there, spent, the first 18 years of my life there. And then moved to Ann Arbor, went to school at University of Michigan. And then from there moved to Chicago right after I graduated college. So I spent a majority of my life in Chicago, actually. That's kind of where I would consider home, I suppose. Like if you want to talk about going back home, Chicago would probably be it for me. But I have to say that Paris is kind of home for me now. And at the very least, Europe feels very much like home to me in general. So, yeah. It's kind of where I've been guided to be. And as per usual, guides are pretty much always right.
Yeah. Now, is that because you have a past life connection to France, or is it just where you needed to be for this time around?
So I do have a past life connection here, but that's not necessarily the reason why I needed to come here. It's actually tied to my twin flame. It's interesting because it's kind of one of those chicken or the egg scenarios, So I became just fascinated with France when my sister first moved here years ago. I was very young when she moved here. She's 4 years older than me. So she moved here her second year in college for an exchange program and just kind of stayed. And I was still in high school at the time. And so I came to visit her. And that was my first time being here in France and fell in love and was just knowing that I needed to live here at some point.
Okay.
And that just continued. So, like the love of France and the French language and, all things French just kind of permeated throughout my experience for my whole life. And lo and behold, I meet my twin flame and he just happens to live here. So, that was amusing when I found that out. Not when I found out that he lived in France, but when I discovered the whole twin flame connection thing and how that all works and how it all weaves throughout your whole existence. And when I can now look back on the trajectory of how everything unfolded, it's pretty miraculous, actually. It's pretty incredible. I would like to say that I completely moved here for myself entirely, and that is partially true. I, of course, had my twin flame here, so it was partly because of him, but ultimately, like, I did really want to be here. Like, it was because it was such a lifelong dream. It was a decision that I made for me. The timing of it was not mine. Basically, it was, I want to say, December of 2018, going into January of 2019. And my guides were like, okay, and you need to go now. And you need to go now. And you need to go now. And I was like, huh? What? Wait, now? They're like, yes, now. And I'm like, wait, no, huh? What? Like I was completely kind of thrown off. I hadn't really expected to go at that time. But it was very much an urgency of like, you need to go now. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I did, packed up all my stuff, put it in a shipping container, grabbed Lucius, and hopped on a plane 6 months later. And as we now know, the pandemic started 6 months after that. So now I understand why the urgency of why I needed to be here when I did is because I needed to start doing my mission. I needed to start reading Akashic Records. I needed to start doing all of these things. And they knew that Chicago would not be the place that would energetically support me in all of that. They needed me here because it was a much more energetically resonant place for me personally. So I was kind of pushed to do it and I did it. So yeah.
All right. And I love how, I guess what you're, alluding to in that is that when any of us are in a place where we have a natural resonance, we have a soul resonance to it, it amplifies our spiritual gifting. Would you agree with that?
100%. Yeah. Because I would say that there are two places on this planet that I have completely fallen in love with. Chicago was the first, and France in general was the second, with maybe Paris being a close third. I mean, it was kind of all of France together, not necessarily just Paris. But yeah.
Got it. Yeah. I know we were recording this at a time when the World Cup final was just about 3 weeks ago. And
Mm-hmm.
how did you deal with that penalty shootout and seeing that Messi finally got his due and winning the World Cup for Argentina? Like, please tell me that even with probably what was the mass disappointment of the loss to Argentina, did you have some love in your heart for Messi, Annette, that he finally got it?
I don't know if I've told you this. That day was an epic fail for me. It was a total fail. So, I mean, you know that I'm not a huge sports fan. So, but of course, I'm in France, World Cup. Of course, I'm going to watch it. So I had watched the previous, I think it was the quarterfinals or whatever it was. So the day of the finals, I actually had a friend coming in town from Germany, and her train was late. So I had to sit home and wait for her to come, which is no big deal. I was making dinner and that sort of thing. I was under the impression that the game was at 8 in the evening. It absolutely was not. And so I'm sitting there making dinner, not paying attention, and I'm hearing literal screams out my window. And I'm like, what's going on? Why is everybody screaming right now? And I literally walked out on my balcony. I was like, oh, the game must be on. Maybe it started early. And then I get a text from my friend Tina, and she's like, are you watching the game? It's in overtime. And I was like, oh my God, I missed the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I basically, I missed most of it. I'm clearly not French enough yet. I have failed. I have failed
clearly,
in that.
Clearly in that. Yeah. Okay. So, hey, a couple other things that you just mentioned. One, Lucius is your cat. For anyone who's listening who doesn't know who Lucius is. And your cat is amazing. And you've had multiple incarnations together, right?
We have.
Or at least in this lifetime, you've had, quote unquote, the same cat a couple times. And you actually did one of the episodes of, The Heart of You with, I forget her name, but the animal whisperer woman.
Sue Burnett. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. It's one of my all-time favorites of the series.
Awesome.
And I loved how, I bet a third of that podcast ended up being her and Lucius just talking to one another.
No, it was literally Lucius took over the podcast. I was like, really all right, cool. You want to chat? It's fine.
Oh gosh, it was awesome. Love that. I do want to get in touch with her, come to think of it. So that was a good reminder. The other thing is you mentioned the TF term, right?
Yes.
Twin flames, which for those of you who are listening who didn't hear Annette's interview with Lee and Sherry and her background in twin flame knowledge and lore and the entire mindset and environment of the twin flame journey, that'd be a great podcast to go listen to, as well as hearing Lucius take over a podcast, right? But
thanks.
I mean, the way that we met was because your sister Michelle, again, who's come up a couple times, is an author. And kind of when I found out about the twin flame journey, needed to learn more, came across her book on Audible, Twin Flame Romance, which was really good. And, reached out to her and then found out, she does tarot readings and a lot of other stuff. She's a very, like you said, I mean, she's been on her spiritual journey for a long time and worked with Deepak Chopra and all the other stuff that Michelle has done. And she's awesome and amazing. And, we'd done a couple sessions together over maybe like a 6-month period. This card came up like almost every time of like maybe the 3 sessions or however, and it was like, we're stuck in a cycle. And she was like, Ray, I remember this coming up. And what this means is that you're stuck in a karmic cycle, and that probably part of the reason that you're who you are now is to clear this karmic attachment, this karmic debt, whatever you want to call it. And you should go talk to my sister Annette, because she does this Akashic Records reading stuff, and she can help you clear that kind of stuff out. So what happens when you are in the records and that there appears to be some kind of a karmic situation going on that maybe this person has evolved past? I mean, that's part of like how astrology weaves into this and everything. The the concept of like, can we supersede our astrology chart? There's some people who believe like, nope, that's what you are. That's what you're going to be, the end, right? Or there's evolutionary astrology for both Vedic and Western, where it's like, no, these are all indicators of like your paths of least resistance, the karma you brought in with you, your natural tendencies, but it also talks about your growth potential and where your soul's trying to evolve to. And that's all indicated in the chart as well. So what do you do with that? Like when either someone comes to you and is like, oh my gosh, I'm going through the same, scenario like 5 times, like what's going, or if you're in the records and it's like, oh, I can see right here, you have a contract with this person or these people, but it's time for that to be expired and we want to clear that. How does that work?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a multi-answer question. So to answer the first one I'll answer is that I believe that I would be considered a believer in evolutionary astrology, because I don't personally believe that your astrology defines you. I feel like it is a roadmap. It tells you where you are. It can give you a heads up for any sort of challenges that come along. It can give you a heads up as to what you might be super talented in, that sort of thing. I don't believe that it is a sentence of doom, right? So, and you and I have had this conversation a few times, right? I feel like when it comes to astrology and pretty much everything in terms of tools like numerology, tarot, anything like that, it's all about trying to get the best picture possible with what you have in any given moment, right? The more tools you have, the more support you have, the more sounding boards and people that you care about and that care about you that you can have surrounding you to be able to help you through your journey, the better, right? Because this can be a really lonely journey sometimes. It can be really difficult sometimes. Well, a lot of the time, it's very difficult, right? So it's something where I definitely believe that it is, your astrology can be transcended. I feel that when somebody is stuck in a cycle, I have seen in the Akashic Records where people have been stuck in the same cycle for lifetimes. They're in this session and they're wondering why this particular thing is happening over and over again. I'm like, well, you've been doing it for 5 lifetimes. So sometimes it can be something like a broken record. If you have something, your record is skipping, right? It's going over the same thing over and over and over again. When that happens, it's simply about having the acknowledgement or recognition that this particular thing is happening and continues to happen. And then you need to start making different choices. Now, when you make those different choices, if you are on repeat, your body has the memory, your body has muscle memory, your soul has memory as well. So then you have to simply just sort of take the time to reprogram the body, the soul, and every aspect of your being to make this different choice. Okay. So that is where some of that evolution, that soul evolution comes in. All right. Now, when it comes to these types of cycles and getting through these cycles, and Ray, you are no stranger to this, that it is a full test of patience. And it's funny because patience is one of those things that I have been cultivating my whole life, because I have never in the past been a supremely patient person. But over the course of the last several years, I've become a much more patient person, understanding that getting through these cycles takes time. It takes time. It takes dedication. It takes the desire to be able to transcend and move through some of these things that maybe have been part of your life for many lifetimes or for a very long time. So yeah, it takes that desire to really move through it.
What percentage of the people that you work with either come to you or discover that they're on a twin flame journey versus who aren't? And of those people who are on that journey end up expressing that they were complete freaking idiots to ever sign up for that whole and I'm relaying that to even in the podcast episode when you went through twin flames, right?
Yeah.
I loved like the last 2 minutes of it. You kind of let your guard down a little bit and just the anyone who thinks just like this is it was a really good idea to divide yourself and double your capacity to learn in this universe of experience and evolve and grow. Boy, that was a fun choice, eh?
Right. Yeah, it's not easy, that's for sure. So I would say, in terms of percentage wise, it's hard to say. Twin flames have a tendency to sort of gravitate toward each other. We all kind of have a similar energetic signature. So we all kind of we gravitate toward each other energetically. So I have actually had quite a few people come forward and be on this twin flame journey. I've had a couple of people come to me not really knowing if they were on one, but then that sort of gets confirmed in the Akashic Records. I don't typically confirm it for people. They have to confirm it for themselves. However, the Akashic Records are usually pretty clear of whether or not that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So actually I just had somebody recently, this was a few days ago even, and one of the things I was shown was literally both souls literally crashing down to earth after they split, going, oh my God, that was painful. Why did we do that? And so it was, that was pretty clear, right? It was pretty clear that that's what was going on. So it's a pretty decent percentage. I would say maybe a third of my clients are probably twin flames. And then
Got it.
In terms of have they been why did we choose this? It really varies. It varies on how far along the person is on the journey. When somebody's just getting started, it can be really, really challenging. And in the beginning stages of the dark night of soul, the whole deal, it can be tough. It can be really, really tough.
Yeah.
And ultimately the tough part about it is facing yourself. And that's basically what your twin is showing you, is that shadow portion of yourself that you need to look at, and looking at your stuff, the stuff that you don't want to see. That's always the hardest part, right?
Yeah. Incredible.
Sure.
You've had so many, we're on episode 49, right?
Mm-hmm.
49. Okay. That's a lot of content and a lot of, amazing and thrilling people that you've had on. Is there one that really stands out to you that hey, this is maybe you're new to the Heart of You and there's an ever-growing library of incredible topics and speakers. Is there one that you'd be like, hey, this one's worth going and checking out? Just like I shared that the Animal Whisperer one with Lucius was just one of my all-time favorites, but what?
Sure. I would say, so for me personally, I would agree with you that the episode with Lucius was just that was just from my personal standpoint. I loved that so much simply because I got to talk to Lucius. So, from my standpoint, I loved that one. I would say two of the most, I think, profound episodes would be the one with Lee and Sherry. I think was really incredible because they give a lot of really beautiful practical information on how to move through connection and through relationship. And that is, God, that is key. It is key moving through this life, right? I'm also slightly biased because, they were my coaches for a long, long time. I went through their program to learn how to coach and things like that. So I am slightly biased, but I still think they're just fabulous and wonderful.
And hey, on that one real quick, Annette, for people who don't know, Lee and Sherry were, on the Twin Flame episode, and you mentioned about connection and relationship and everything. So someone may go oh, I don't want to listen to that because it's about twin flames and I'm not in a twin flame, situation. But I think part of what you're sharing is that there was more value in that than just if you're a twin flame or not.
100%. Yeah. Because actually the most profound change in my life while working with them and learning how to do this work was actually with my relationship with my father. And actually my relationship with my mom has changed significantly. We are much closer. We get along much better. I don't get triggered by her as often. I still get triggered by her occasionally, but not nearly as much as I used to. So it improves, this work can improve all of your relationships. And yeah, it's super important because once you're able to improve the relationships energetically through this work, it then sort of improves the relationships in the 3D. And then that allows you to have that support system to continue the work that you need to do, because having that support system is so important, right?
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've come across so many different topics is there one, not, and I'm not saying about like a guest on the podcast, but I mean, just in general, esoteric spiritual life where you would say, hey, this is one to stay away from or to avoid? I mean, I think that's part of the challenge that people can have, especially if they come from a more dogmatic religious background, whenever they enter into a time of being more spiritually curious. And their life is like, I don't want to get into something that is detrimental or demonic or wrong or something. Is there anything that may not fit one of those three categories, but just is something that say, yeah, you know what, this might not be a good thing for you to pursue?
Well, I mean, ultimately, there's nothing that is demonic or wrong or anything like that. Those are all just sort of, fear tactics essentially. But my first answer would be, don't do anything that does not feel in your heart completely aligned. Okay. So, and that might be sort of a vague answer, but if it's not something that you're drawn to or that you feel real resonance with, don't feel forced to do it. Just completely leave it alone. I mean, for example, for me, I mean, this is super silly, but like I've never been really super drawn to yoga, and that's just because I haven't. And I don't mind doing yoga. I like doing yoga, but it's not a spiritual practice for me. My spiritual practice is completely different. And when I'm doing yoga, it's exercise or stretching for me. It's not a spiritual practice. So, and I know that's completely different for millions of people,
Yeah.
but like, that's
me,
just my,
right?
right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's just my personal experience. Right.
Yeah.
And then on a more practical level, I would say if you're going through a rough time, and trust me, I went through this phase, and if I could have cut this phase a little shorter, it probably would have benefited me, but everything happens in the timing that it needs to. So, because, you learn what you need to learn in the time that you're meant to learn it. But I would stay away from future telling readings. If you are in that space of constantly needing more future readings, more future readings, more future readings to know what's going to happen in your life, that's going to show you that there is something that you need to look at within yourself, because that means you're not being present with who you are. You're not dealing with what is going on currently. You are just looking for something to make you feel better. And that is simply a way of, I don't want to use the term self-medicating, but that's kind of what it is. When we want to avoid what's going on presently, if you're going through a lot of grief and a lot of pain and you're trying to escape it by drinking, smoking, sex, other people, internet, TV shows, whatever it happens to be, getting future readings can be kind of lumped into that realm, right? It can be in that place of watching too much TV to escape. You're trying to get a reading that has a really good outcome so you have something to look forward to, versus actually looking within and doing the work. I'm not saying that you can't get future readings, because obviously I do give my clients certain information about the future that helps them plan, that helps them know if they're on the right path, if they're going down the right road. But if you're sort of in that space of constantly getting readings or constantly watching tarot readings or something like that, that should be a signal to you that, okay, maybe I need to look in a different place for what this is giving me, right? And I can speak to this because I went through it. So I know, like, I went through, I don't know, probably a good year of like doing nothing but getting future readings and listening to tarot card readings and things like that. And it just kind of, I mean, it helped in a certain way, because I was so down in the low dark night of the soul that any glimmer of hope did help a little bit. But I would recommend sort of trying to dive into some of these other modalities or other tools so you don't have to go down that road.
Yeah, that was really great advice. And likewise, have been in that situation too, dark night of the soul, and you're just like, please someone tell me that this existence makes sense. Because from everything I can tell, it doesn't. And it's so painful. You're just looking for anything to alleviate that. But I'd say that for anyone who's listening to the podcast, who's working with a spiritual advisor or doing any of the things that you're doing, even their own readings, personally with their own cards, or, I think like if you've reached that point of, if you can be honest with yourself about dependency, it's not good. Like, no practitioner should try to keep you in a program of coming to them as the sole source of your enlightenment and understanding and divination or whatever.
100%.
Yeah, it should be the opposite, right? A
Yep.
truly empowering spiritual advisor, coach, counselor, whatever you want to call it, should be helping that person learn to function on their own.
Yeah, and giving
Yeah.
those tools. It's funny because I remember last summer I was with some friends in some small little village south of Paris, and I had a session with a client that day, and I went and had lunch with them, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys, you'll never guess, I lost a client today," and they were like, "Why are you happy about this?" And I'm like, "No, you don't understand. I'm really happy because she doesn't need me anymore. Like she's good, right?" And they were like, "Oh, that's really cool." And I was like, "No, it's amazing. It's amazing that she literally doesn't need me anymore and she can go and do this on her own." So that is the goal. That is absolutely the
Yeah,
goal.
that's beautiful. So Annette, we've talked about a number of different factors in your life, how you developed your spiritual gifts, the work that you're doing, and how that just evolved over time and everything. But as far as your personal life, having the pleasure of getting to know you over the last couple of years, I'm well aware that you are a huge Disney fan and Harry
Yes.
Potter, right? I mean, these are
Yes.
two very, very near and dear to your heart topics. So first question is Disney.
Yeah.
Who is your favorite, let's say like more modern character and classic character, and why?
Okay. For the modern characters, it's hard because I have so many that are like a part of my journey. So Boo from Monsters Inc., the little girl, it was actually my nickname for most of my 20s and part of my 30s.
Oh, wow.
And it was just because I thought she was adorable and I loved the character and I loved Monsters Inc. I just thought it was brilliant. It was very creative. And I loved the fact that, instead of scaring people, they were using laughs at the end to be able to power the city, which, was 10 times more powerful than anybody's fear. So, like, that kind of message for me was really resonant, even back then, before I was even, sort of on my spiritual journey. So, Boo was very sort of important to me, I suppose, from a more modern standpoint. I also love Stitch and Baymax, like completely love, love, love Big Hero 6. But I would say that my favorite in terms of modern characters would probably be Moana, which is actually, I just surprised myself with that one. I think the reason why is because of what she stands for, because she is somebody who is, sort of going after her dreams. She's somebody who is breaking away from tradition while still respecting tradition in a certain way. Every time I hear the songs, it could just be Lin-Manuel Miranda that he just makes me cry. But like all of his songs make me cry. Recently, I've been basically listening to and watching a lot of Encanto as well. Yeah, those songs get me every time. So yeah, I would say Moana.
Okay, Moana, that's interesting. So Annette, for those of us that haven't seen the movie that Moana is in, what movie was that?
So the name of the movie is actually Moana. Surprisingly enough, actually in France, it's called Vaiana. They changed the name for the French movie. I'm not sure why.
Hmm.
It is a movie about a girl who is sort of meant to take over the tribe in her village. And her dad expects her to step up and be the chief. And she wants to go and explore the ocean and be, somebody who actually goes in and finds new things and doesn't stay where she is. So it's about her dad and her parents wanting her to stay exactly where she is, and she wants to go and explore and expand her knowledge and her experience in life. So she goes on this journey regardless of what her parents want for her, and it is very much about finding resonance in what you're aligned with doing and following your heart.
That sounds like one that would be good to see. Did you ever see Whale Rider?
Oh my gosh, yes, a long, long time ago.
It sounds almost like a similar kind of vein with that, which was when that movie was over. I don't know if I've ever seen a final scene of a movie that I literally had to get up, walk out of the room. I was almost in shock and then just started bawling.
Oh, wow,
It was
yeah.
so powerful. Yeah, Whale Rider. Gosh, that's an amazing movie.
God, yeah, it's been so long since I've seen that. I'm gonna have to see that again.
Yeah, I highly recommend that for the listeners.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so classic. Disney character, which
Classic
one do you
would
like? Yeah.
be Pooh Bear, definitely. I've
Mm,
always had an affinity for Pooh Bear. I'm not sure why, I just love him.
yeah.
He's awesome.
Yeah, I think that if there's anyone who doesn't like poo, they need some help.
Right?
There's like that's you're living in your shadow or something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly.
I bet even Jung's shadow liked poo.
Yes, exactly.
He
Exactly.
couldn't like Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, and just even the whole, the psychology of the whole poo universe or whatever, to put it in
Yeah.
Marvel terms, right? But you've
Yeah.
got the whole, Eeyore and Tigger and the opposing view of like optimistic mania and significant depression and cynicism, and
Mhm.
there's just it's a beautiful bonding and love between Christopher Robin and Pooh, and I mean it's beautiful.
It's sort of the original Inside Out. If
Oh
anybody's
yeah,
seen
great
that
point.
Pixar movie Inside
Yeah.
Out, and it's sort of the modern version of
Mm.
Pooh and the 100-Acre Wood and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I cried at Inside Out too.
Oh my god, that one's a powerful movie.
The other thing I remember about that is they had the short before Inside Out started that was the volcano.
Oh,
Do you
yes.
remember that? And the
Yeah.
volcano went dormant, like while the other one was trying to reach it or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was crying for that too. And I was just like, this was supposed to be a fun kids movie. Like this is so horrible. Yeah, I think that was after I'd started yoga, and my heart chakra actually like really opened up
Right.
and everything. Okay, so Harry Potter.
Yes.
Let's do two things. Okay, I got three quick questions. Which house would you belong to? Is it the Sorting Hat, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where would you have been sorted in that?
So I actually was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this the other day. There is a Harry Potter store and cafe that has just opened here in Paris.
Mm,
It's delightful. It is so much fun. And we're sitting there drinking our butterbeer, and we were talking
ah,
about what house we would be in. I would definitely be in Hufflepuff. Hufflepuff is also a house of loyalty. And I think that that's a quality that I've had pretty much my whole life.
mm,
I don't know, there aren't that many Hufflepuff main characters, but
yeah.
a lot of them were sort of like the tertiary characters. So like Cedric Diggory was Hufflepuff, and I think Madame Sprout was as well. There's a bunch of them actually, but none of the main kids were Hufflepuff. And I also love the fact that in French, Hufflepuff is pouf le souffle, which I just think is like the cutest thing on the planet.
Yeah, that's great. Well, yeah, and oh my gosh, can't believe I'm drawing a blank on his name that played Cedric that was in Twilight.
Oh, right. Mm.
Him.
Yeah,
Anyways,
that dude.
Edward. Yeah,
Sparkly
Edward.
vampire dude.
Yeah, who actually is a phenomenal actor,
He
right?
is.
He really grew into the fact that he's an outstanding actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was shocked when I saw the first movie that it was like, because I only just saw it recently, the
Right.
whole series, and I was like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, it's what's his name? It'll probably pop into
Robert
mind. But
Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson, thank you. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I think I would have been Gryffindor for sure. I think like
Yeah.
the kind of some things I've had to stand up to at work.
Sure. Oh,
There
I can
seems to be
definitely see that. Yeah.
recurring pattern of having to stand up against corporate bullies, like
Right.
the Slytherins of the
Yeah.
corporate world.
Oh, the Ministry of Magic
Yeah, yeah,
or anti-magic
exactly.
as it will.
Yes. Oh goodness. Okay,
Yeah.
so who's your favorite Harry Potter character?
I would say Hermione.
Okay.
I've always resonated with her since I first started reading the books, and it's for a really dumb reason, but it's something that all of you curly girls out there know. The struggle is that when I was younger, I hated my curly hair because I didn't know what to do with it. And so the way that she's portrayed in the book initially is about this like, mad out of control frizzy hair because she didn't know how to do it, right? And then by the time she goes to the winter ball, she's all
Mm,
coiffed thing. So it's like the struggle with her hair was real, so I kind of related to her on that level. But then also on a lot of other levels as well, it's the sort of feeling like you're not being noticed. And I kind of struggled with that when I was a kid as well. So I kind of really aligned with her on that sort of empathy of knowing what it feels like to be overlooked, right?
yeah.
She took it in a different way. She kind of went hey, like I'm going to raise my hand every 5 seconds to make sure you notice me.
Mm,
I didn't take that stance, actually. I kind of retreated more within myself. So I went a little bit of a different direction, but I could understand her character from that standpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, okay, so then least favorite character in the Harry Potter universe?
Umbridge, 100%.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard to read that book because she's so awful. Like, so awful. Any person who has ever been sort of emotionally abused and physically abused, like, it's hard because she does both in this story. So like, she's not a great person. I would say like from a visceral fear or like, icky feeling standpoint, she was worse for me than Voldemort was even.
Oh, she was absolutely just, it was,
She was a
I'm
nightmare.
with you. Like Voldemort, is like openly evil.
Yeah. He's like, I'm an evil dude and I'm going to do all kinds of evil things. Yeah.
And I'd rather take a politician who was flat out open about the fact that they're an asshole, right? Mm-hmm. It's the politicians that pretend that they're not, but are worse behind the scenes than people can imagine. That's where, and Umbridge to me was like, I'm here, to save Hogwarts. Like, the Ministry of Magic is concerned about, like, no, you want to take total control and you have an end game and you're just, awful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We both like Voldemort better than Umbridge. It's pretty bad.
I mean, at least he was upfront about what he wanted and what he was doing. Like she's hiding behind kittens. Kittens. Yeah. I mean, come on. Yeah, no, it was awful.
So bad. And if like we just take it one last step further into, the Majestic Beast series, which I thought was excellent.
Oh, the Magical Beast. Yeah.
Magical Beast. Yeah. Outstanding. Right.
Yeah.
And Credence, who was so deeply, abandoned and abused and everything. And then Grindelwald sees that he can manipulate that. Right. And how horrible that is. And then you think about like the guy who became Voldemort, Tom Riddle, that he likewise dealt with this abandonment and like all these other things that happened to him.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that how J.K. Rowling wove through the whole Harry Potter universe that, an abandoned, the challenges of the abandoned child.
Yeah.
Even Harry is orphaned, right? And then what he lives through, like, anyways. Okay, this really should have been a whole separate episode.
Oh, funny.
What a wonderful time together.
Thank you, Ray. It's been so much fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoroughly enjoyed getting to ask you all these questions.
Did you learn something new or did you know all this already?
I did. I mean, I think we know each other well enough. I think I knew a lot of it, but at the same time, there were a couple things that I was like, oh wow, that's that's interesting. So,
cool.
Thank you for sharing everything that you did and all that you're doing. You are a force for good in this world.
Thank you.
I know that even of my friends that I've referred to you, there's been some amazing results. With how you're able to communicate this information and really help people get clarity on their lives, right? I mean, so much of this is about just help me get a better focus on what's going on. Because, this world is not the easiest thing to discern a lot of times. So thanks again. And
thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, okay. So Ray, I would like, sorry to interrupt. I want to have you give your information if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So LinkedIn is one way to get a hold of me. I've been in corporate land for over 20 years now and big software company here in the United States. So just Ray Schloss, SCHLOSS. It'll be in the, the notes for the episode, but that way on LinkedIn is one way. You can also get me at thriving959 at outlook.com, thriving959 at outlook.com. I'm almost finished with a couple certifications, including human potential and hypnotherapy, which I really love. And I'm working with clients on those, really helping to identify, limiting belief factors that can be, transformed, transmuted, eliminated to help people be able to move forward in a better way in their lives. So yeah, either one, LinkedIn or thriving959 at outlook.com. I would be happy to help.
Beautiful. And you are fully doing sessions now. And I actually, when you finish the rest of the certifications, we might have you back on so you can talk about in full, like everything that you're doing, because you're moving forward on your journey and your path and being able to start coaching others as well. So it's a beautiful thing.
I would love that, my friend.
Yeah. Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much, Ray.
You're welcome. Thank you, Annette. We'll talk again soon.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
If you would like to get in touch with me, you can always reach me at infinitesoullove.com. I'm also on all social media. That would be TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, as well as YouTube at Infinite Soul Love 1111.